Have you ever wondered what happens when you deliberately summon something from beyond the grave? In feudal Japan, samurai warriors created the most elaborate supernatural summoning ritual the world has ever known. They called it Hyakumonogatari Kaidankai, the 100 ghost stories.
100 candles, 100 tales of terror.
And when that final flame goes out, something appears in the darkness.
Tonight, we enter the shadowed chambers of Edo period Japan,
where brave warriors played a game so
dangerous that most participants stopped at story 99, too terrified to complete what they had begun.
In the sweltering summers of 1600s Japan, when the Tokugawa shogunate had brought peace to a warrior nation, young samurai found themselves facing an unexpected crisis. For generations, their ancestors had proven their courage on blood-soaked battlefields.
But now, in this new era of stability, how could they demonstrate their bravery?
The answer lay in confronting not human enemies, but something far more terrifying: the supernatural forces that Japanese culture believed surrounded them at every moment. The earliest written record of Hyakumonogatari appears in 1660.
In a text called Tono Igusa. But the ritual's roots stretch back even further, to medieval Buddhist storytelling sessions, where monks would recite 100 sacred tales, believing that upon completion, miracles would manifest.
Over time, this spiritual practice transformed into something darker.
A deliberate attempt to breach the barrier between our world and the realm of spirits.
But this was never mere entertainment.
In the rigid social hierarchy of Edo Japan, ghost stories served as coded social criticism. The vengeful spirits in these tales, almost always women who had been betrayed, murdered, or abandoned,
gave voice to the powerless in a society
where direct criticism of authority could mean death.
Oiwa from Yotsuya Kwaidan, Okiku from Bancho Sarayashiki, Otsuyu from Botan Doro.
Japan's 3 most famous ghost stories all feature women seeking justice from beyond the grave.
The ritual itself was meticulously choreographed, as precise as any religious ceremony. The ideal setting required 3 rooms arranged in an L shape.
The first room, where participants gathered, was kept in complete darkness. The second served as an empty corridor, also shrouded in shadow. In the third and most distant room, 100 blue paper lanterns were arranged alongside a writing desk bearing a mirror.
Every participant wore blue clothing, the color of the otherworld in Japanese tradition. No weapons were permitted, not just for safety, but as a symbol of spiritual vulnerability.
The ritual began on moonless nights during the height of summer, when the boundary between the living and dead was believed to be at its thinnest.
Here's how it worked.
One person would tell a ghost story to the assembled group. When finished, that storyteller would rise alone and walk through the dark corridor to the lantern room. There, they would extinguish a single flame, look at their reflection in the mirror,
and return through the darkness to rejoin the circle. The next person would begin their tale, and the cycle continued. One story took roughly 5 minutes. 100 stories required over 8 hours.
The ritual extended deep into the night, reaching its climax during what Japanese folklore calls the hour of the ox, that liminal time between 2 and 3 in the morning, when spiritual portals are said to open widest.
But here's where Hyakumonogatari becomes truly unique among the world's supernatural traditions. Most participants would stop at story 99. They would sit in the darkness, surrounded by a single flickering flame, and wait for dawn rather than complete their task. Because they genuinely believed that telling the 100th story and extinguishing that final candle would summon something real. The few historical accounts of completed rituals make for chilling reading.
In the 1665 text Otogi Boko,
5 men decided to see the ritual through to its conclusion.
when the last flame died,
Witnesses reported thousands of firefly-like lights entering the room.
coalescing into a brilliant mass that struck the ceiling like thunder.
Before crashing to the floor, all 5 men lost consciousness. When they awoke, they were unharmed but forever changed by what they had experienced. What they had summoned, according to tradition, was called Ao-Andon, the Blue Lantern. This entity, depicted in 18th century artwork as a pale woman with long black hair, 2 small horns, and blackened teeth, was said to manifest whenever the final candle was extinguished.
Her very name derives from the ritual itself. She who appears when the blue light dies. To understand why the Japanese believed speaking ghost stories could literally summon spirits, we must examine the concept of Kotodama, the soul of words.
Ancient Japan called itself the nation blessed by the soul of language, believing that words possessed active spiritual power. Speaking someone's name, even when they couldn't hear it, was thought to affect them across any distance. In this worldview, the 100 stories told during Hyakumonogatari created cumulative spiritual vibrations that transformed the ritual space into a beacon for the deceased.
This differs fundamentally from Western supernatural traditions. While séances attempt two-way communication with specific spirits, Hyakumonogatari makes no such effort. The goal isn't conversation, but manifestation.
Unlike Ouija boards, which pose questions seeking yes or no answers,
This ritual relies purely on narrative to open its portal. And unlike individual challenges such as Bloody Mary, Hyakumonogatari was essentially a group experience, creating shared fear and collective vulnerability. The visual elements of the ritual carried deep symbolic meaning. Blue light in Japanese culture represents the boundary between worlds, the indefinable space where this realm meets the next. Human souls, or Hitodama, are traditionally depicted as floating blue flames, and blue lantern light gives human faces a corpse-like pallor, transforming familiar spaces into otherworldly chambers. The mirror, one of Japan's 3 sacred imperial regalia, serves as more than mere decoration. Japanese spirituality views mirrors as vessels for divine presence, bridges between the physical and spirit worlds.
when participants looked into the mirror after extinguishing each candle,
They weren't simply testing their courage.
they were checking to see if anything had appeared behind them in the reflection.
The timing of these rituals during Japan's hot summers connects to the Buddhist festival of Obon.
When ancestral spirits return to visit the living world. This is why Japanese culture associates ghost stories with summer, unlike Western traditions that favor autumn's Halloween. The heat itself played a role, as theater owners discovered they could draw larger crowds to ghost story performances by promising that fear-induced chills would provide relief from sweltering temperatures. Hyakumonogatari continues to influence Japanese popular culture. Films like 1968's Yokai Hyakumonogatari and Masaki Kobayashi's internationally acclaimed Kwaidan bring these traditions to global audiences. Anime series from XXX to Ghost Hunt reference the ritual, while video games like Paranormasight incorporate its elements into interactive horror experiences. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect of Hyakumonogatari isn't what happened when people completed all 100 stories. It's what happened when they chose to stop at 99. In that moment of restraint, sitting in almost complete darkness with only a single flame between them and the unknown, participants weren't displaying cowardice. They were showing the ultimate respect for forces they believed were genuinely real.
This wasn't superstition or entertainment. For the samurai who created this ritual, Kotodama wasn't metaphor, it was natural law. Words had power. Stories had consequences. And completing the 100th tale meant accepting responsibility for whatever answered that call. As we consider this remarkable cultural phenomenon,
We're reminded that the most effective horror doesn't rely
on sudden shocks or graphic imagery. Instead, it builds slowly, systematically dismantling our sense of safety until we find ourselves questioning the very nature of reality itself.
the true genius of Hyakumonogatari lies not in what it reveals,
But in what it leaves forever hidden in the darkness beyond that final unlit candle.
What would you do faced with that choice?
Would you tell the 100th story?
Or would you join those wise samurai who understood that some doors
Once opened, can never be closed again?